Well, hello for both my full semester and online classes here for American government. We're moving on now to our Chapter 12 on Congress. After this, we'll have recordings on Chapter 13, the Presidency, Chapter 14, Bureaucracy, and Chapter 15, the Supreme Court. So we're moving right along, and the semester is really winding up. Here we are, April the 10th in the class. Chapter 12, Congress. This is a bit dated congressional map. It's changed somewhat from 2012 to 2014. It would be a little bit redder, as we use red to depict districts that are held by Republicans, and they picked up some seats in the 2014 midterm election. We can see that there's some distribution here in terms of land size versus perhaps smaller locations where you have districts within cities. And as you recall from Chapter 10, we described that the representation within a district is based on the number of people there, not the amount of land size. So we do see some lopsided areas here. There's a great deal of territory controlled by Republican members of Congress, but there may not be as many people living in those areas. There you have Congress in session. During a joint session, you have both the House and the Senate there, and have the President generally given a State of the Union address is the reason why you would have both House and Senate members in the chamber. You know, one of the big issues has been managing the budget. This is an issue for the Congress. It's their power of the purse. How do they manage the budget? How do they keep the budget going? And of course, there are issues that may pop up in which the leadership of the House and Senate may not agree with the way the budget's being operated, and may then just not continue to fund it. And we've had times in which it's led to what's referred to as a government shutdown. And at least parts of the government would not be in operation during that time. So how should money be spent on different services, and are those services vital? Are they necessary? I mean, these are some of the ongoing debates that we see within Congress. There you can see an iconic photo of the Capitol, and one of the better known, I think, areas of the Capitol there. I imagine some of you have gone to visit the Capitol. One of the great things about Washington, D.C. is it may be expensive to get there, but once you're there, a lot of the sites to enjoy are free, and you can go and travel and get to have a really enriching experience. This is the other side of the Capitol, and I don't think it's quite as recognizable. This is the statue of James Garfield. Garfield was the only president to go from the House of Representatives to the presidency. And so he was, I think, a person that had considerable amount of future possibilities as a president. But unfortunately, he was assassinated early on in his presidency. And this statue, which you can still find in Washington, D.C., was put together by his comrades in arms during the Civil War. Members of his unit put together the money to build this statue and to commemorate President Garfield. When we think about Congress, let's recall back to Chapter 2, and we look at the Virginia Plan and New Jersey Plan. So remember then, the makeup of the Congress is reflective of those two plans during the debates at the Constitutional Convention. So the large state plan, Virginia plan, representation based on population. And the small state plan, the New Jersey plan, representation is equal among the states. So as you can imagine then, if you can't resolve that, then it's really going to be hard to move forward as a country. And so the way to work this out was to compromise and to have both of them in some way represented within the Congress. So we have the U.S. Senate representing the New Jersey plan, and the House of Representatives representing the Virginia plan. And so as a result of that Connecticut compromise, look at the state of Oklahoma, for example. We have 5 representatives And every state has 2 senators. That would mean in the Electoral College, we say how many electoral votes per state. It's based on the number of representatives and senators. So we have 7 electoral votes. California has 55. Again, I want to stress on the Electoral College that the representatives and the senators are not the electors. That's just where the number comes from. So we can see there's still some differences there in terms of representation and influence based on the House of Representatives. So again, drawing the districts based on where people are located so you can have a fairly even representation based on population can then lead to some considerable differences among the congressional districts. And we see that even in the state of Oklahoma. It's a very big state, and yet we have 2 districts that are fairly small, make up only a few counties, roughly 3 counties, a portion of another one for District 1 for Tulsa, mainly Tulsa, and then 3 counties that make up District 5, which is primarily Oklahoma County. So District 3, for example, goes to the border of New Mexico in Cimarron County and goes all the way then to Sapulpa, Oklahoma, which is a suburb of Tulsa County. Just to give you some idea then of the differences among these congressional districts. And where most of you are located, I would assume, you're in the 2nd district. That's where I'm recording this lecture. That's where I live. And so we have our district goes from the border of Kansas and Missouri all the way down to the border of Texas. Well, most of the people then who are in Congress, if they decide to run for re-election, they get re-elected. And we talked about what an incumbent meant in Chapter 10, so the person who holds the position. And we can see here that consistently the re-election rate is astronomical for members of the House. And it's also very high for members of the Senate, as we can see there. So it doesn't work out that way every year. There are times in which it goes down from there. It generally has to go down from there for the House. But most members of the House, when they run for re-election, they will get re-elected. So 2010 is still known as a year in which people were very upset with the incumbents. At least that's what we were told. But even there, as we can notice here, 86% of the incumbents were re-elected in the House, and 90% were re-elected in the Senate. So with all that anger that was supposed to be out there, when it came to getting the incumbents re-elected, it didn't have much impact there. They were able to get re-elected. Why is that? Let's consider or explore some reasons why it's difficult to defeat an incumbent. Most political action committees will support the incumbents. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The reason why they support them is because they win. And they win because PACs support them and other organizations that raise money, like 527 committees. So it's very difficult to defeat an incumbent. That's part of the reason. Money goes to the incumbents. Some other advantages that the incumbents have, casework. So they do things that they're supposed to do to help the folks back home. And it may be just photo opportunities, get into the local newspapers. It's one way for a family to be quite happy, but it also then means that that member of Congress where people are reminded of that member of Congress in their local papers and their local news organizations. But it can also mean things such as getting grants for communities, helping people with special leave in the military, helping people with working out issues with Social Security or Medicaid. And so there we can see ways in which the incumbent is helping the folks back home. That's in part their job. Some are better at the job than others. But if you're a challenger, you just don't have an opportunity to compete like that. You're not doing the photo opportunity of some high school student, let's say, getting an award. You're not helping someone out with their Social Security check. The incumbent is, and so that's something that is a built-in advantage then for the incumbent. The letters are mailed out stamp-free. They're paid for by taxpayers. This is part of that communication that's involved between the incumbent and the constituents. And so again, we expect that. We would like for them to respond to our questions and our issues that we have. But it means, again, that they get their name out there. They're able to respond. They're able to generate interest and information that the challengers are not able to do. And perhaps the most controversial is to spend money in ways that they view to be important, and perhaps those local areas view to be important, but others may view it to be wasteful. What exactly is a good use of taxpayers' money? And we have that debate all the time in our society. Is it something that we should be spending money on? If it's a new road or bridge, a defense contract, a science contract with a local research institution, an agricultural project, we may wonder if that's really worthwhile, but there can be plenty of ways in which we can say that it is. But it's referred to as pork barrel politics, and so the question is that a good use of taxpayers' dollars? So the outsiders may view it as wasteful spending. Those who are the recipients of the funding may not view it that way. One that's always struck me has been studies on grasshoppers, such as the mating habits of grasshoppers, which on its surface may sound to be absurd. But many agricultural institutions, Oklahoma State, for example, or perhaps Iowa State, may get some of that funding to do that. And millions of dollars, perhaps even billions of dollars a year are lost through insects like grasshoppers eating up crops. So is it really a waste of money to have that kind of scientific research to determine how to limit the spread of grasshoppers? Is it wasteful? And so we're left with that question: what exactly is the right way to use taxpayers' money? But it can certainly benefit an incumbent. When we look at the power of members of Congress, we have the leadership within both the majority and the minority, and this has certainly been one of the ways in which we can see the rise of women in politics and the ability for them to gain power. This is a picture of Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the House. She's now the House Minority Leader. And clearly her time as Speaker of the House meant that she was the most powerful woman in the history of the United States, and will remain that way until, if and when, more than likely if, or just when, excuse me, sooner or later we're going to have a woman president. That person would then become the most powerful woman in our history as in American government. But until that time, Nancy Pelosi would be the most powerful person because of what it means to be Speaker of the House. So these are some of the powers of the Speaker. Just look those over. You might want to pause and write down the powers of the Speaker that we see here. Pay close attention to the power of scheduling. That's really, oftentimes, most speakers will reflect on their time and say that was the most important of the powers that the Speaker would have. The Speaker is also powerful because of the Succession Act of 1947, and these are the individuals in place to be president after the president. And let me correct one point here, and I'll show this on another chart that's out of date, where I have John Boehner as Speaker of the House. Please replace that name with Paul Ryan, and I do mention that in some other part of the lecture here. So after the president, who becomes president? You have the Vice President, the Speaker of the House, now Paul Ryan, and the President pro tempore, Orrin Hatch. And then you go on to another part of the succession, which would include members of the cabinet. So there is a considerable number of people who are in line to be president through the Succession Act of 1947. It's very important then to consider, if somebody could not serve as president, we need someone in that position quite quickly to be able to make extremely important decisions. And so after the President pro tempore would go to the cabinet, starting with the Secretary of State. This is Mr. Hatch, Senator Hatch from Utah. He's the President pro tempore. To become the President pro tempore, you're the senior member of the majority party. Majority party in the Senate is the Republican Party. So Senator Hatch has been there for a number of years, and he's the senior member of that party, which has the majority. So he becomes the pro tempore. So in other words, it's not a position that someone runs for to get elected within the caucus of the party. The reality of the Succession Act is that we're within 30 minutes of a nuclear holocaust at any given time. It's a humbling idea to remember. It's brought out in a bizarrely strange and funny way in this movie known as, called Dr. Strangelove. I would urge you to watch the movie if you'd like to get some ideas about it. It's very interesting. And, you know, what does it mean, and what could lead to nuclear war? Again, that's something we probably don't want to spend too much time thinking about, but it is a reality that we have to address. And so somebody has to be in a position to make extremely important decisions. If the president can't do it, who can? And so we have the Succession Act, we have the 25th Amendment that's in place to remove a president if the president cannot do the job because of some sort of physical or mental issue, or how to replace a president if the president's incapacitated in some way. And all of that has to deal with the nuclear possibilities of the world. So this is our current Speaker of the House. This is Representative Paul Ryan. And Paul Ryan is a Republican from Wisconsin. And so he became the Speaker of the House after John Boehner stepped down. And there was somewhat of a void, and Republican caucus determined that this would be the individual who should be Speaker. And continue on with the leadership then of both the House, in the House here, at both majority and minority leadership. When you have a two-party system, one of the great advantages of that is it's easy to determine who is the majority, and which party is the majority and which party is the minority. So Kevin McCarthy, a representative from California, is the majority leader. So he would be the one who would run the caucus of the majority party. That would mean that Republicans would get together and work out their issues, on determining strategies and talking points, and also then determining the leadership within their party. The whip is there to enforce party discipline and to give both carrots and sticks to people, members of the caucus who are perhaps not voting for an issue, or they want to try to get them to vote for a particular bill. Steve Scalise, Republican from Louisiana, is the House Majority Whip. Same can be said for the minority party. So Nancy Pelosi becomes the leader of the Democrats in the minority status in the House of Representatives, and so she runs the minority caucus, the Democratic caucus within the House of Representatives. She's from California, Democrat from California. And the House Minority Whip, his job then is to enforce party discipline, again provide carrots or sticks for people who don't vote the way they would like for them to vote in key issues. This is Steny Hoyer, comes from Maryland, Democrat from Maryland. How do you go about enforcing party discipline? Let's spend some time thinking about that. What would be some of the ways of doing this? So I kind of relate it to a yin and yang situation, the positive, negative energy. Which one is best? Maybe works different from one individual to another. So the carrots and the sticks. You're trying to get someone who's on the fence, member of Congress, they're not going to vote for a particular bill, so how do you get them to vote for that bill? You can do log rolling. You vote for my bill, I'll vote for your bill. So part of the way of getting people to go along. So one of the ways you could do that is put people on powerful standing committees. And a committee that approves of legislation, that's a standing committee. And then that's the positive. You vote for this bill, we're going to put you on a positive committee, or a powerful committee. If you vote against the bill, we'll remove you from a powerful standing committee, or we won't consider you for that standing committee. These are some of the better known standing committees. There's a good chart in your text that shows the different committees there. So certainly focus on that. The Ways and Means Committee is the Tax Writing Committee. The Appropriations Committee is the Tax Spending Committee. The Rules Committee is important for the House because they determine the length of debates and what amendments may be added onto a bill. So an amendment is a change or an addition to a bill. And the Armed Services Committee, I think, speaks for itself. It deals with military spending and military regulations and different ways of using the military. Another carrot or stick is the re-election bid. So, you don't vote for this bill, then, well, we're not going to support your re-election bid, or you do support the bill, we're going to support your re-election bid. That can be somewhat important. I don't know how influential overall. I mean, I think you could have plenty of members of Congress that can say, we'll independently raise our own money. Think back to Chapter 10 in the text. Or what they can also do is just say, do you really want to take that risk of losing a seat because I didn't vote for this particular bill? That may happen, but more than likely, this is an extreme strategy for sure to go this direction. All right, when we think about the Senate, here's the presiding officer of the Senate. That's the Vice President, Joe Biden. So Joe Biden, as Vice President, is the individual who would run the daily operations of the Senate if he chooses to be there. If there's a tie in a Senate vote, he can cast the tie-breaking vote. He doesn't vote unless there is a tie. More than likely, he won't be there for the daily operations of the Senate, and that's where the President pro tempore would come in. Again, Senator Hatch from Utah. So, again, for majority party, minority party, you have two caucuses, and majority party, Republican Party in the Senate is the operations conducted by the majority leader, who is Senator Mitch McConnell from Kentucky. So he would run the operations there within the Senate in terms of the Republican caucus. And the individual there to enforce party discipline is John Cornyn, a Republican from Texas. So again, the carrots and sticks that we just described would be some of the things that he would use to try to get senators to vote a certain way. For the Democrats, the minority leader is from Nevada, and that is Harry Reid, a Democrat from Nevada. And the minority whip is Dick Durbin from Illinois. A key part of the whole process within Congress is how a bill becomes a law, so certainly focus on that on page 493. It's a great chart that shows the whole process in so many different ways in which a bill along the way can be defeated and not become a law. Thousands of bills are introduced every year. Most of them do not become law. It makes sense that they wouldn't. And so it's a winnowing process to determine which ones will go on to become laws. Lots of different ways in which they can be defeated. Many different steps. So pay attention to that on page 493. Some of the differences between the House and the Senate. We can see here that in the Rules Committee for the House, with 435 members, it's more important to try to control the debate process. So debate is limited. How much people can speak or who does speak is determined through the Rules Committee. It's not the same in the Senate. With only 100 members, there can be filibusters. People can continue to control the floor, not yield the floor. They can put a hold on a bill, move on to other pieces of legislation, or they can add on amendments to a bill called a rider. So there's certainly less formality, less regulation of the lawmaking process within the Senate. So again, we can see what can be called vote trading. We can look down upon that, and I think there's reasons to do that. Yet at the same time, I think we can understand how things get done. And you help me, I'll help you. And don't we do that in many ways in our life? And so I think we can understand that in some ways, maybe not always appreciate it, but understand why this may be a process that takes place in the House and the Senate. But notice the two most important ways of determining how members would vote is on constituents and colleagues, that those two have a great deal of influence for members of Congress in determining how they will vote. So this leads us to the influence that some members of Congress are most persuaded by. Are they going to vote according to their constituencies, or are they going to vote according to his or her own conscience? And so if they're concerned about their possibilities of getting reelected, and that's a major issue, then we would assume they're going to think based on what the delegates want them to vote, how they want them to vote. If they are more focused on their own conscience, then they may vote ways that can alienate their own constituency. In our history here of Oklahoma, we actually had a well-known member of Congress at the time, died over 20 years ago now of brain cancer, a man named Mike Sinar, but was certainly well known as an individual who focused on voting his own conscience. And so that was the main way that he would certainly look at it, that he was a trustee, that he was being entrusted to vote a certain way. And even if it was something that would alienate his members of Congress, his constituents, he would still vote. He lost. He was defeated in a primary, in large part because of many of the voting positions that he took. But that's the risk that can be underway if you do become a trustee. All right, that's where we are with Congress. We'll stop there. And next time we're together, we'll be covering Chapter 13, the Presidency.